Hi, everyone. Diabetes Connections has expanded into in-person events. There are 2 remaining for this fall. Mom's Night Out, our event for moms of children with diabetes and women with type 1, will be in Phoenix in October. And we've added a new event for the entire community, Club 1921. The next of those will be in Charlotte, North Carolina in November. We have 4 more cities set for Mom's Night Out for 2026, and we will be adding and expanding Club 1921 out of Charlotte. All of the Mom's Night Out information is at diabetes-connections.com. If you're interested in partnering with us on any of these, please reach out. Diabetes Connections is what it's all about. This week on Diabetes Connections, catching up with Dexcom's Jake Leach. Our first interview with him since we found out he's going to be promoted to CEO. As always, a lot going on. We get the details on a recent recall for Dexcom software, the studies presented at EASD, a look at what's coming up for the rest of this year and into next, and of course, I ask your questions. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. If you're new around here, my son was diagnosed with type 1 just before he turned 2 back in 2006. He is now 20. He's almost 21, so we've been doing diabetes for a long time. And a full disclosure, he has used a Dexcom since he was 9 years old. He started on the G4 Pediatric Platinum, and he does use the Dexcom G7 these days. You're also going to hear a commercial for Dexcom. They are a longtime sponsor of the podcast, but we keep the interviews separate. They don't tell me what to ask or what to say, and they don't listen back to the interview before it goes to you. Longtime listeners are very used to hearing these disclosures and disclaimers, but I do think it's really important, especially if you're new, and technology episodes like these bring out a lot of new listeners. I'm going to talk about this more in our In the News episode coming up on Friday, but I want to highlight this. It doesn't have anything, as far as I know, to do with Dexcom, but I think it's really important. And this is a letter that the Food and Drug Administration has sent out to drug advertisers. This happened just about a week or 2 ago, and the letters went out to traditional pharmaceutical companies as well as to online pharmacies. You may not realize that America is one of, I think, only 2 countries in the world that allows pharmaceutical advertising direct to consumers. And boy, were there a lot of people against it. I was a health reporter back in the 90s when they changed the rules and allowed companies to do this. I'm going to link up more information in the show notes so you can read up on it. I've already heard from some big diabetes companies that are taking a very close look at this. I think there's going to be a lot more to come. I just wanted to spotlight it here. Again, has nothing to do with Dexcom as far as I know, but I didn't want to wait until Friday to let you know that this is in the news if you hadn't seen it. Lord knows there is so much going on these days, but I think this is something that affects all of us as consumers, and certainly it's a big diabetes industry story. Okay, I've talked to Jake Leach a couple of times for a few years now. As I mentioned, he was recently promoted to CEO. The current CEO, Kevin Sayer, will step down at the end of the year. I caught up with Jake at the EASD conference, that is the European Association for the Study of Diabetes. The conference happened last week in Vienna. And because of my travel and Jake's schedule, this recording took place on September 16th. We are airing it on September 23rd. My conversation with Jake Leach right after this. Did you know all the sounds used to make that song come from a site change with the Omnipod 5 automated insulin delivery system? Pretty cool, huh? With Omnipod 5, pump site changes are simple. The pod lasts up to 3 days, 72 hours, and to change it, you just fill up the pod with insulin, place it on your body, tap a few buttons in the Omnipod 5 app, and you're ready to go. There's no tubing to prime like with traditional insulin pumps, and it's virtually pain-free. So you never have to see or handle the insertion needle. Want to try Omnipod 5 for yourself? Request a free Omnipod 5 starter kit today by visiting omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary.
Did you hear the pod drop?
Jake Leach, welcome back to Diabetes Connections. Always great to talk to you and get caught up on all things Dexcom. How are you doing as we are talking? You're in Europe.
I am. Yeah, thanks, Stacey. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm in Europe at
the EASD conference, biggest diabetes conference in Europe.
Since we last talked, big development for you. You have been named CEO to take effect in the new year. Congratulations. And let me just start by asking, I mean, you've been at Dexcom for more than 20 years. Any any thoughts on changes, goals, stay the course? I'd love to hear what goes through your mind when someone says, "Oh, you're going to be the new CEO in January." What's your move?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Stacey. Very excited. As you mentioned, been at Dexcom a long time, and Kevin, our current CEO, who's transitioning into our executive chairman. He and I have worked together for many years. We actually worked together at MiniMed before we worked at Dexcom. So we see a lot of things the same. So there's a lot of things that I will do or keep running the same as we've always done. Things like focusing on customers, patient first mentality, innovation driven. So there's a lot will remain the same. I think moving forward, there's just so much opportunity for CGM to make a difference around the globe. Dexcom has have been focused in many different areas, but one of the areas that I'd like to spend more time on is looking at how our technology can make a benefit around the globe. More people in general. We've been focused kind of on that higher end of the category, like the high risk category, which is a super important part of our customer base. But there's a lot of people with type 2 that are just starting to get coverage for CGM. And we want to be there to help meet their needs when the time comes.
And a lot more to come, I am sure, in the next weeks and months on as you take that role. But let's talk about what's happening at EASD. The announcement that I saw this morning was about smart basal. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that is, what that means?
Yeah, it's a exciting new feature that we've been working on for a little while. It's under review by the FDA and for a CE mark. And what it is it's an algorithm-led technology that is built into G7 or will be built into G7 when we launch it. And it's designed to help both a healthcare provider and a individual with type 2 who's just either starting basal insulin or maybe they've been on basal insulin for a while and not really meeting their goals. The point of the algorithm is it uses CGM data as well as some of the input from the healthcare provider to really optimize a basal insulin dose. The standard of care today with basal insulin titration is there's a lot of back and forth between the physician and the patient trying to get to the right dose. They usually start based on the individual's weight, and then they kind of incrementally increase the dose. This is a system that automatically analyzes what the dose should be for that individual to meet their fasting glucose target. And it just adjusts. And, the clinical study we ran, most of the subjects got to their optimum basal dose within 30 days. So that's much, much faster than what typically happens out there, even when someone has a CGM, because they're using kind of a more manual-based titration to get to that correct basal dose.
So does that assume that the person is talking to their healthcare provider this whole time to help with the titration? Is the CGM giving them feedback that the person can kind of use on their own? I mean, I come from the type 1 world where we're making our own adjustments. Don't tell our doctors, even though they know.
Yes, this one's basically the physician orders, basically puts in a treatment plan into their Clarity system, and then sends it to the user, and it shows up in the user's mobile app. And then it's a guided therapy adjustment that happens every day. It recommends a new dose until it gets to the optimum dose for that particular individual. And so this is long-acting insulin, 1 shot per day, trying to basically minimize hyperglycemia while ensuring they don't go hypoglycemic. So it is an automated process that the patient does give their own dose, but the physician can check in on it at any time and how things are going, but they don't have to. The system basically operates until you get to that optimal dose.
Yeah, that's great. I wasn't thinking, it's hard to adjust, Jake, as you can imagine, for somebody like me who doesn't even see their kid's CGM anymore. I'm trying to figure out, how would that work? Of course, you just look at the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Any use case for type 1 for this, perhaps in the future? It doesn't sound like you've submitted for approval for that.
No, it's really, this one's focused on for type 2 basal users. But we also at the conference talked about our new, it's a basically trend adjusted bolus calculator. The idea on that isn't new. That's been used quite frequently in insulin pumps. But if you look towards multiple daily injection users that are manually injecting, we wanted to build that technology right into the G7 app to make it simple to use. And so also, as we see more and more smart pen integration, we believe this is a feature that could really benefit users that are using smart pens versus automated insulin delivery to really get to the best control they can. And one highlight is that as we've also started to bring in the meal detection and the meal logging that we just put into G7, you can kind of see how those all start to bridge together to become a pretty complete package when it comes to analyzing a meal, recommending a bolus, and then helping ensure that they get to their glycemic target.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that if we have time a little bit later. But I also want to ask you about pregnancy and type 1. Really interesting study looked at exercise before and after eating. And it looked like exercising before made more of a difference, which is not what we usually think for people with diabetes, right?
Yeah, I think it was basically just the importance. That study had some very interesting kind of exercise activity as well as outcome data on using CGM during pregnancy and just ensuring that glucose is under control so that you have a proper weight. The babies were lower gestational weight, or they weren't overweight, which we often see in gestational diabetes. The high weight of the baby tends to indicate that they were using a lot of that insulin. So the mother was insulin resistant. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're focused on expanding and bringing more awareness to the benefits of CGM in pregnancy.
Something else that came across my news feed recently was a correction or a recall that Dexcom had issued for G7 apps and One apps. This was about unexpected sensor failure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Basically, anytime we detect a bug in our software, we do an analysis, kind of hazard analysis. Say, okay, what's the risk of this particular bug? And most of the bugs are small, and we fix them quickly. This particular one results in the app shutting off and then not potentially alerting a user. And the chances of this happening are very small. But if a sensor failed in a certain way, that older version of the G7 app could just move into a sensor failed, and it wouldn't tell the user that the sensor failed. It would have it indicated on the screen, but it wouldn't alert them audibly. So they may still think that they're getting their alerts and alarms, but instead the app is actually stopped. The sensor stopped, and the app is no longer receiving glucose information. So that could be, as you could imagine, that could be a dangerous situation where you're not getting alerts even though you think you are, say you're sleeping. So in that situation, we fixed the bug very quickly and rolled out a new version. But we did require users to upgrade because of the potential, although very small, there was a potential risk there. Anytime we do something like that where we force the upgrade, it generally falls into the category of a field action, which then is considered a recall. It's the way I characterize it. It's a little bit like older hardware device regulation applied to software. Because software it's fixed and updated before it even gets notified and filed, but we have to follow kind of the regulatory rules, and so that's how it works. And so there's been, over time we've had a number of these where we find something, we say, hey, we need to upgrade all of our users because we found this issue. And so that happened in August of this year. We've already updated everybody to the newer version that doesn't have that issue. But that did just get posted.
Yeah. So, and if someone's listening and they're not sure, they just need to check that their software's up to date.
Yeah, and I believe we've forced the upgrade, so you can't be running an older version. So no one should be concerned.
Got it. Before we get to my listener questions, I had another one for you, and I haven't seen this get too much play yet. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, it will have. But the FDA sent a letter recently advising on direct-to-consumer advertising. I don't know if Dexcom was one of the companies that got a letter. It was about 100 letters, and most of this seemed to be focused on like compounded pharmacies that are sending crazy ads for Ozempic and things like that, like Hims and Hers and that kind of stuff. But you all do a lot of advertising direct to consumers. Is this going to be an issue? Have you seen this FDA letter? Is this something on your radar at all? Because it does seem to be I've been a health reporter since the 90s, and I don't see a lot of chatter about direct to consumer advertising since they made it legal in the late 90s. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think one of the unique differences here is when it comes to drugs, pharmaceuticals that have side effects, there's a lot of rules around how that gets advertised, right? And what the potential side effects could be. With CGM, the only real side effect is better glucose. So, no, but anyway, I'm aware of that letter, but I don't think it necessarily applies to us. But we do a lot of direct-to-consumer advertising because basically we've often tried to make sure that the awareness around CGM is there, And as the category of CGM continues to grow and more people have insurance coverage for CGM, we want to make sure people are aware that the technology exists and they should ask their doctor about it if they haven't already been recommended a CGM. So that is why we do so much direct to consumer.
Yeah.
And now with Stella, we've also been advertising that product as well to ensure people know that it's available and it's over the counter.
Excellent. All right, listener questions for you. Karen has a question that is near and dear to my heart. Been asking about the Follow app for a very long time. Interesting. Can the Follow app have alert profiles? Every day I'm having to change my alarm setting twice. It would be easier on parents to have one less thing to do. I will fold that into an overall question. Any changes coming for the Follow app?
Yeah, if you've noticed, we've made a number of updates to Follow in the last 6 months, and we have quite a few more coming. Profiles is definitely one on the short list of things to do because we know that having those types of profiles can add convenience for folks.
Jake, I have not noticed because I was kicked off the Follow app when my son was a senior in high school. Mutual decision. So let me ask you about those changes. And let me also ask if you haven't yet done this, one of the things that I thought would be a good upgrade was you have the website now that you can see if there are any issues with servers, right? Sometimes the server is not working in your area and people do not know. And honestly, people don't know to go to that website. Any consideration of some kind of push notification?
So we do actually have push notifications built into Follow. We have the ability if it's a major outage. Actually, frankly, a lot of this came out of some of the learnings from some of the challenges we've had many years ago with the system. Was when we had a major outage. The one time we did, it was hard for us to notify users of that. We had things like our Facebook page and other, but coming out of that, one of the big learnings was we need to make sure we can notify people. So if we have a large outage that extends for a period of time, we can send everybody that notification. Generally, our track record over the last couple of years has been the things are solved extremely quickly on Follow. We haven't had any major downtime. But if we did, we would send that notification. But I think the point around, even if it's a temporary issue, we could potentially build that into the notification system.
Have you
But to
ever
this
done?
point, we've only kind of been ready to hit the trigger on those if it was some sort of a major outage. But knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't occur.
Have you ever sent out a system-wide push notification for Follow?
We, not system wide, but we have sent out push notifications. I'll give you some examples of for users that need to upgrade their apps. And when we're doing a forced upgrade, there's a point in time where your old one's not going to work. So we have done quite a few of the notifications to users around that. We also have basically started sending notifications to users when we recognize that, say, they're having a trouble pairing their device. We actually can detect that and then send a notification that says, "Here's some tips on how to make your phone work better." So we're going to keep doing more of that because it really helps users in the moment. They get the right information at the right time. So part of the user experience journey that we want to keep making the journey enhanced and better. That's part of it.
Okay, so whenever I ask my listeners about questions for you in the past, we've got a lot of direct to watch, a lot of Omnipod, a lot of when is this stuff going to work together, a lot of adhesive questions in the past. But Jake, this time around, almost all of the comments were, please tell him that we're not really satisfied with G7 issues. And I want to read you one. And I always tell my listeners this, and Benny's been using this product for a long time. We don't have these issues. So like Follow, it's not front of mind for me. But I'm going to read you this one that comes from Jeffrey, who I've known for a long time. And he said, I have another one with G7 issues. I get it. Products fail. But I had 7 failures in the last 90 days. And the customer experience for trying to get a replacement is absolutely wild. I've started keeping the end of the box with the lot number on it since it's now required. I should be able to make 3 taps in the app to report a sensor issue and request a replacement. Or even better, a sensor failure should call home to Dexcom, let them know I had a failure, and ship out a replacement. What's the response here? I'm sure you're aware of these issues. You keep track of sensor failures on your end.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a large number. I'd be interested to find out what type of failure he's having. I would be surprised if they're all the same type of issue. But one thing, though, to his Jeffrey's point there around the replacement experience, it's something we've been focused on because we've heard that from a number of users. And one of the things we did was we started implementing some new policies around sensor replacements, and it was really trying to manage some of the issues we were seeing where folks were requesting sensors that either they weren't customers. There was a little bit of fraud going on, so we're trying to resolve some of that. And I think what it has caused is some impacts within the community in terms of messaging that we need to make sure is correct. So we've been focused on that, training our team. The other thing too is his point around you should be able to request it in the app. There is the page where you can request a sensor replacement in the app, but we've been working on making that easier to use. One of the things about it is if the information for your account isn't entered exactly correctly, it can basically not go through. And so we want to improve that experience because I agree that it should be if a sensor fails, that's on us. It should be very simple for someone to get their replacement. And so it's a priority for me and for the team here to make sure we improve that experience for users.
Got it. Okay, so Chris wanted to know, and I'll tell you, Jake, I'm not following this one entirely, but you may. He says, in explaining the issue with G7 sensors sometimes not starting when they are inserted and people using a magnet to get the sensors to start, he says, went on a different podcast and talked about the issue is the sensor not passing its internal startup checks. But when the magnet was used to have the sensor try again, it is passing on the second try and starting the sensor. Chris says that doesn't make any sense to me. A diagnostic failure should result in the sensor declaring itself failed, and the magnet shouldn't do anything. What is that about?
He's going deep on the engineering. Basically, that check it's a battery voltage check to determine whether the battery voltage is good, and then it starts up. And so this one, what happens is when it first gets deployed, that battery voltage is just barely below where we want it, and it doesn't start up. And so when you do the magnet swipe a second time, it does a second check and starts up. It's not an issue with the quality of the product. It's just that particular battery didn't pass that check. And so that's what explains it. It's not a kind of measurement accuracy, anything like that.
Wow. Okay. We have a very creative...
I was very impressed with the community who figured that out, how to do that. We didn't actually even know about it. We knew that unit failed for battery check, but then when you swipe it again, it tended to work.
They can do anything. They are unbelievably resourceful. The 15-day sensor. Where are we in that? And then there was also a concern about replacements and insurance companies, only giving people, obviously a 15-day sensor, you're going to get fewer sensors for the year. So people are really concerned about their allotment failures and trying to replace those. So a couple of questions there. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So 15-day, we're on the verge of launch. We're starting to use it in our community of warriors so that they can get access to it and basically start generating excitement around the launch and some of the media assets and things we want to use. So it's kind of like the limited launch within that community, and then we'll bring it out to the broad community here shortly. So we're basically building inventories, getting ready for launch. These days, when Dexcom launches a new product, it's not like it used to be. We have to have a really significant amount of this product in inventory to be able to launch because we don't want anybody to run into a shortage. We want that changeover to be extremely smooth for users and for their healthcare providers. So that's important. On the other side, for insurance companies, I think for sensors, it's really around if you have an issue, we need to be able to replace your sensor. And that's going to happen, a 15-day sensor. The vast majority will last 15 days, but you may have a few that don't. And so we want to be able to replace that. So we've also been working with our team to make sure that they understand on the 15-day sensors, as well as the 10 days, that replacement experience when a sensor doesn't last needs to be perfect for a user. And I think just in general, sensor technology, I get asked this question all the time around sensor survival. And we strive to develop the technology to the point where it'll last as long, all sensors last 15 days. But we all know things happen in life. Sensor adhesive starts to come off. Sometimes the sensor probe stops detecting glucose accurately. And we say, okay, it's no longer good. We need to switch it out. So that's part of, I think, CGM technology in general. And so our goal then is when sensors don't last, the experience for replacements needs to be best possible. And so we're going to continue to work on that.
Any plans for G7 or Dexcom CGMs that are meant for people who dose insulin to ever go over the counter like Stelo?
It's a good question. If you actually, outside of the United States, there are RCGMs, G7, Dexcom One Plus, they are available over the counter without prescription. But in the US, it is a prescription device. It's really focused on, because insurance coverage is there for folks, that's the important part, and there's insulin involved, so there is a prescription. At this point in time, we haven't really looked into that in terms of expanding it, but it could be something, the possibility.
Yeah. And then one of the questions I got in the group was from a pharmacist who assists her 90-year-old patient with her G7 insertion because of her hand strength or lack thereof. And I'm talking to more and more people about aging with type 1. Is hand strength, my God, that's remarkable at age 90, right? To be using the technology and hopefully for many more years. And any consideration for things like that as you move forward to next iterations?
Yeah, it is. It's actually, we have design specs around the force it takes to both open the product as well as deploy it. And so we take a look at those, make sure that they're applicable for everybody. But that was very conscious around the applicator design and the packaging design.
Excellent. Just one more question about the G7. I mean, I don't know if you can share this, Jake, but there is this suspicion, and I'll just call it that, among the community that the G7 doesn't, quote, work as well as the G6. In my group, I got a lot of people said, I don't want to change. I'm going to keep the G6 as long as I possibly can. You keep track of these things. Is there any
We do.
demonstrable difference in terms of sensor failure, connectivity, things like that overall?
There's not. I think certainly when it comes to accuracy and reliability, there isn't a difference. We don't see that. I have seen users that have used G6. They've had the occasional issue with a G6 sensor. They move to a G7, and then if they do have an issue early on, often it's kind of equated to the G7. But what I will say is that in some of the connectivity to closed loop systems, the G7 has a different level of connectivity. It's designed to connect to 3 devices. G6 only connected to 2. So there are some differences there. And one of the things we found is, as we've worked with our insulin pump partners, there's improvements that they've been making, and we've made on our side too, to improve the reliability of the Bluetooth connection. Because that's something that we saw after the launch of G7, and we've made several enhancements as our partners have too. And I think there's still some coming on the insulin pump side to improve connectivity. That's the one I hear the most in terms of one of the differences.
All right. And then my last question, Jake, I asked you about CEO. That happens in January. What's your first move? Are you cleaning out Kevin's stuff, moving all the pictures? Is there something in the back of your mind that you really want to get done?
I'm planning to meet with a lot of our teams around the world. I already do that, but there'll be a new emphasis on that, making sure I get out and see all of our teams and learn everything I can about the different markets that you operate in all around the world, because healthcare is different in many different countries. And it's really important for us to have strong knowledge about how things actually happen on the ground, and not just look at it all from a U.S. perspective.
Well, congrats again, and thanks for coming on the show as often as you do. I hope that continues. I really appreciate Dexcom's responsiveness and openness, even when the questions aren't exactly what I'm sure you'd like to hear, but they are honest, and I appreciate your response, Jake, as always. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Stacey, as always, and yeah, we'll keep doing this.
More information in the show notes. I will link everything up. Every episode has its own homepage over at diabetes-connections.com. And the questions I asked from listeners come from our Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group. But you can always reach out, let me know your concerns, what you'd like me to ask next time, or for any of the tech companies. My email is stacy@diabetes-connections.com. And before we go, Shana Tova, a happy new year on this first day of Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the high holy days for the Jewish community. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions, and thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
Diabetes doesn't always have to interrupt your day. Dexcom G7, a continuous glucose monitoring system, sends your glucose numbers to your phone or receiver. Know where you are and where you're headed without finger sticks and without interruptions. Dexcom G7 is the most accurate CGM, and it's covered by Medicare. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Finger sticks required if symptoms or expectations do not match readings. See user guide for instructions. Data on file must meet coverage criteria. For full prescribing information on risks and benefits, visit Dexcom.com.